Today, we uncover the last selfies of people eaten alive by animals, from a fisherman who faced an alligator after taking a selfie with his catch, to a woman who wanted to get the perfect photo with a Siberian tiger. But first, let's begin with the first story, where one man's routine became a nightmare fuel. It was August 14th, 2015, and the golden evening light stretched across the rugged landscape of western Colorado as Evan Marshall made his final maintenance rounds at the privately operated Big Cat Rescue Facility. The 27-year-old technician had been working at the sanctuary for nearly 2 years, maintaining the specialized enclosures that housed rescued mountain lions, lynx, and other wildcats. Evan had grown up on a cattle ranch in eastern Colorado, where handling unpredictable livestock was simply part of daily life. His natural confidence around large animals had impressed the facility director during his hiring process, and Evan had quickly established himself as the most reliable maintenance worker on staff. The big cat seemed accustomed to his presence during routine repairs and cleaning, rarely showing signs of agitation when he worked near their enclosures. The facility housed 12 rescued mountain lions, including a mature female named Sierra, who had been brought to the sanctuary 3 years earlier after being orphaned as a cub. Evan had been involved in Sierra's daily care since his first week on the job, assisting with feeding protocols, enclosure upkeep, and routine observation duties. Over time, he began to view Sierra less as a dangerous wild animal and more as a familiar presence, frequently remarking to co-workers that she appeared unusually calm around him. That growing familiarity gradually led him to become more casual about safety boundaries that were designed to exist precisely because familiarity could be misleading. Mountain lions are North America's second-largest wild cat species, with adult females typically weighing between 80 and 130 pounds. These solitary predators possess incredible strength and agility, capable of leaping up to 40 feet horizontally and 15 feet vertically. Despite their sometimes relaxed demeanor in captivity, mountain lions retain all of their natural hunting instincts, reflexes, and territorial behaviors, particularly when they perceive a threat within their enclosure. As Evan approached Sierra's enclosure that evening to inspect a damaged section of perimeter fencing, he noticed the mountain lion resting in the shade of her elevated wooden platform. Earlier, maintenance work had revealed a failure in the overlap between the primary enclosure fencing and the secondary safety barrier, creating a temporary gap that violated standard safety protocols. The defect had been logged for immediate repair the following morning, and staff had been instructed to avoid the area unless absolutely necessary. Sierra appeared completely relaxed, her breathing slow and steady as she lay in the warm afternoon air. Evan had been exchanging text messages with his girlfriend throughout the day, sending her photos of his work and describing the animals he cared for. She had asked repeatedly to see the mountain lion he spoke about most often, curious about the animal Evan seemed so confident around. Believing the situation to be safe despite the documented barrier issue, Evan pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. The mountain lion remained motionless as Evan positioned himself closer to the damaged overlap, stepping partially into the restricted buffer zone to improve his angle. He switched his phone to the front-facing camera and held it at arm's length, carefully angling the shot to capture both himself and Sierra resting behind him. Wanting a clearer frame, Evan leaned forward toward the gap in the fencing, his upper body extending closer than safety protocols allowed. The selfie, he thought, would be proof of his experience and comfort working alongside powerful predators. What Evan did not realize was that Sierra had given birth less than 48 hours earlier. The birth had occurred overnight in a concealed den box at the far end of the enclosure during a period of reduced staffing, and the cubs had not yet been observed during routine checks. Though the cubs remained hidden and silent, Sierra's maternal instincts were at their peak, dramatically heightening her sensitivity to movement, shadows, and perceived intrusions. As Evan adjusted his position for the photograph, his shadow shifted across the enclosure entrance. Sierra's head lifted instantly. In a fraction of a second, her posture changed from resting to alert, and her powerful muscles surged into motion. The attack came without warning. Sierra crossed the enclosure in 2 explosive bounds, reaching the compromised section of fencing just as Evan leaned closer. One massive paw shot through the gap, striking Evan's shoulder and neck with devastating force. Her claws tore through fabric and flesh, severing muscle and puncturing vital blood vessels. Evan's phone fell to the ground as Sierra's claws hooked beneath his jaw and across his throat, pulling him hard against the fencing. His struggles only intensified the animal's instinctive response. Her second paw raked across his face and scalp through the gap, opening deep lacerations as blood poured onto the dirt below. Evan's hand struck his radio during the struggle, triggering the emergency channel, but the sounds that followed were incoherent and weak. Severe blood loss, airway trauma, and shock rapidly overwhelmed his body as Sierra maintained her grip, reacting as a mother, eliminating a perceived threat near her unseen cubs. After several seconds, Evan's movements slowed and then stopped entirely, his body collapsing against the chain link barrier. The facility director discovered Evan's body approximately 20 minutes later during a routine evening walkthrough and immediately contacted emergency services and wildlife authorities. The subsequent investigation determined that Evan had entered a restricted buffer zone and leaned into an unsecured barrier opening, directly violating established safety protocols. Given the recent, undocumented birth and the clearly provoked nature of the attack, authorities concluded Sierra had acted within normal maternal defensive behavior. She was transferred to a higher security, non-public facility in Wyoming, where she later successfully raised her cubs under enhanced containment measures. The incident prompted immediate statewide reviews of maintenance procedures, enclosure design, and staff training protocols at exotic animal facilities across Colorado. Yet big cats weren't the only predators that could turn deadly when humans ventured too close to their territory. In the murky waters of Louisiana, an experienced fisherman's decision to enter restricted waters would put him face to face with one of America's most powerful reptilian predators. It was July 28, 2016, and the cypress trees of Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin cast long shadows across the dark water as Louis Boudreau navigated his aluminum boat through the narrow channels he'd fished since childhood. The 34-year-old commercial fisherman had been working these wetlands for over 15 years, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, who had made their living from the basin's abundant fish and crawfish populations. Lewis had grown up in nearby Henderson, where knowledge of seasonal wildlife patterns was passed down through generations of fishermen and hunters. His extensive experience in the swamps had taught him to read water conditions, weather patterns, and animal behavior, with the expertise that came from a lifetime spent in the wetlands. However, declining fish populations in his usual spots had forced Louis to venture into areas he typically avoided during certain times of the year. The area Louis chose that morning was a shallow cove surrounded by dense vegetation, known locally for its large bass and catfish populations. What Louis didn't fully consider was that late July marked the height of alligator nesting aggression, when female alligators become extremely territorial while guarding their nests and newly hatched young. The secluded location that made it perfect for fishing also made it ideal habitat for nesting alligators. American alligators are among North America's most powerful predators, with adult females reaching lengths of 8 to 10 feet and weighing up to 200 pounds. During nesting season, female alligators become extraordinarily aggressive, attacking anything that approaches their nesting sites or threatens their young. These prehistoric predators can remain completely submerged and motionless for extended periods, making them nearly invisible until they strike. Lewis had been fishing successfully for several hours when he hooked what felt like a substantial bass. The fish fought with impressive strength, taking nearly 8 minutes to bring to the boat. As Lewis finally landed the impressive catch, he realized this would be perfect evidence of his fishing skills to share with his regular customers at the local fish market. The bass was easily the largest he'd caught all season, and he wanted to document it properly. Louis anchored his boat in the shallow water near the shoreline and stepped into the knee-deep water to position himself for the photograph. He held the massive bass with one hand and pulled out his phone with the other, switching to the front-facing camera to capture a selfie with his impressive catch. The murky water made it impossible to see the bottom clearly, but Lewis had waded in similar conditions countless times throughout his career. He extended his arm to get the best angle, trying to frame both himself and the trophy bass in the shot. Louis smiled broadly as he held the fish up beside his face, adjusting his position in the shallow water to get better lighting for the selfie. He wanted to capture the pride and satisfaction of landing such an exceptional bass in these challenging conditions. What Louis couldn't see beneath the dark water as he focused on his phone screen was the large female alligator that had been guarding her nest just yards away from where he stood. The alligator's attack came from directly below, as her powerful jaws clamped down on Louis's legs with bone-crushing force. The impact drove Louis backward into deeper water as the alligator began her death roll, a hunting technique designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Lewis's body spun violently in the muddy water as the alligator's powerful muscles twisted with devastating efficiency. The base Louis had been holding flew from his hands as he struggled against the alligator's grip, his arms flailing desperately as he tried to reach the surface for air. The alligator's massive tail struck Louis repeatedly, delivering powerful blows that drove him deeper into the murky water. Her jaws maintained their crushing grip as she continued the death roll, her prehistoric instincts driving her to ensure the threat to her nest was completely eliminated. Lewis's struggles gradually weakened as blood loss and drowning combined to overwhelm his system. The alligator maintained her attack until Lewis's movements ceased entirely, then dragged his body toward the dense vegetation where her nest was concealed. The entire encounter lasted less than 5 minutes, leaving only ripples on the water's surface and Louis's empty boat drifting slowly away from shore. Louis's boat was discovered later that afternoon by another fisherman who noticed it floating unmanned in the main channel. Search and rescue teams launched an immediate operation, but the murky water and dense vegetation made recovery efforts extremely challenging. Louis's remains were finally located 3 days later by wildlife officials using specialized sonar equipment. The investigation confirmed that Louis had been fishing in an active alligator nesting area during peak nesting aggression, though the specific location wasn't marked with warning signs due to its remote nature. The responsible alligator was captured and removed from the area by wildlife officials. Lewis's death prompted renewed efforts to educate commercial fishermen about seasonal alligator behavior and nesting patterns. But swamp predators weren't the only animals that could prove deadly to those who underestimated their territorial instincts. In the pristine wilderness of Glacier National Park, a camping enthusiast's desire for the perfect wildlife photograph would bring her dangerously close to one of North America's most powerful predators. It was June 8, 2014, and the morning mist clung to the valleys of Glacier National Park as Emily Harper emerged from her tent to witness one of the most spectacular sunrises of her life. The 30-year-old marketing executive from Seattle had been planning this camping trip with her partner for over a year, saving vacation time and researching the best hiking trails and camping spots in Montana's crown jewel. This was Emily's first visit to grizzly bear country, though she had extensive hiking experience throughout the Pacific Northwest. Emily and her partner had attended the mandatory bear safety briefing at the park's visitor center 2 days earlier, where rangers had emphasized the critical importance of maintaining at least 100 yards distance from grizzly bears at all times. The couple had been diligent about following food storage protocols and making noise while hiking, but Emily had been disappointed by their lack of wildlife sightings during their first 2 days in the park. As Emily prepared breakfast at their campsite in the Apgar area, she spotted movement in the meadow approximately 200 yards away. Through her binoculars, she could clearly see a large grizzly bear foraging for roots and berries in the early morning light. Grizzly bears are among North America's most powerful predators, with adult bears weighing between 300 and 800 pounds, depending on the season and food availability. These omnivores possess incredible strength and can run up to 35 miles per hour despite their massive size. Grizzlies have poor eyesight but exceptional hearing and smell, making them highly sensitive to sudden movements or unfamiliar sounds. Emily's excitement about finally encountering a grizzly bear in its natural habitat overrode the safety training she had received just days earlier. She grabbed her camera and began moving slowly toward the meadow, believing that the bear's apparent focus on feeding would allow her to get closer for better photographs. Her partner was still sleeping in their tent, unaware of Emily's decision to approach the dangerous predator alone. Emily managed to close the distance to approximately 75 yards before the grizzly became aware of her presence, but her desire for a more dramatic photograph pushed her closer still. When she reached what she believed was a safe distance of about 50 yards, Emily switched her phone to selfie mode, wanting to capture herself with the massive bear visible behind her. She took several photos, each time stepping incrementally closer. By the time Emily closed the distance to roughly 30 yards, the bear's behavior changed. The grizzly lifted its head, huffed sharply, and flattened its ears against its skull, clear warning signals that Emily failed to recognize. When the bear charged, it covered the remaining distance in seconds. Emily turned to flee but slipped on dew-soaked grass and fell forward just as the bear reached her. The grizzly struck her with overwhelming force, knocking her to the ground and delivering a rapid defensive mauling. Powerful bites and crushing blows from its massive paws caused catastrophic injuries within seconds. After less than 30 seconds, The bear disengaged and retreated toward the tree line, its defensive instincts satisfied. Emily's partner discovered her body 15 minutes later, after being awakened by the sounds of the attack. Park rangers arrived within 20 minutes of the emergency call, but Emily's massive injuries made any medical intervention impossible. The responsible grizzly was tracked and identified through DNA evidence, but wildlife officials determined the bear had been defending itself against human encroachment and made no attempt to destroy the animal. The incident prompted immediate reviews of bear safety education programs and campground placement policies throughout Glacier National Park. However, terrestrial predators weren't the only animals that could turn deadly when humans misjudged their behavior patterns. Off the coast of Florida, a marine biology student's academic knowledge would prove insufficient when faced with one of the ocean's most unpredictable predators in its natural hunting environment. It was July 3, 2017, and the warm waters off Neptune Beach reflected the brilliant afternoon sun as Connor Willis adjusted his snorkeling gear for what he hoped would be an educational encounter with local marine life. The 21-year-old marine biology student from Florida had been studying shark behavior for 2 years, writing papers on shark conservation and frequently discussing the low statistical probability of shark attacks with anyone who would listen. Connor had driven to Neptune Beach with 2 friends for a 4th of July weekend diving trip, choosing the location specifically because of its reputation for diverse marine life and relatively clear water conditions. However, recent storms had stirred up sediment along the coast, creating the murky water conditions that Connor's textbooks had identified as increasing the likelihood of mistaken identity attacks by certain shark species. The area where Connor chose to snorkel was adjacent to a popular fishing pier, where local anglers had been having success with various species throughout the morning. The combination of fishing activity, murky water, and the shallow depth made the location ideal hunting territory for bull sharks, though Connor's focus on finding interesting marine specimens to photograph prevented him from fully considering these environmental factors. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous shark species in the world, known for their aggressive nature and ability to hunt in shallow coastal waters, where humans frequently swim and surf. Adult bulls can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with incredibly powerful jaws containing rows of triangular, serrated teeth designed for crushing and tearing. Connor had been snorkeling for approximately 30 minutes when he spotted what appeared to be a large shark moving slowly through the murky water about 20 feet away. His excitement about potentially observing shark behavior in the wild overrode his usual caution, and he began swimming toward the animal for a closer look. Connor believed his academic knowledge of shark behavior would allow him to safely observe the predator without triggering an aggressive response. As Connor descended toward the shark, he pulled out his waterproof phone case and switched to selfie mode, wanting to document this incredible encounter with what he hoped would be a harmless species. He positioned himself to capture both his face and the shark's silhouette in the murky background, thinking this would be perfect content for his marine biology social media accounts. The selfie would demonstrate his fearless dedication to shark research and conservation. Connor held his phone steady as he floated in the water, adjusting his position to get the best angle of himself with the shark visible behind him in the frame. He failed to recognize the subtle signs that identified it as a bull shark, rather than the less aggressive species he had hoped to encounter. The shark's broad, blunt snout and stocky build were characteristic features of bulls, but Connor's focus on capturing the perfect selfie prevented him from making a proper identification until he was already within the animal's strike range. The bull shark's attack was swift and devastating, as its predatory instincts activated upon detecting Connor's approach. Through the murky water that had concealed its presence so effectively, the massive predator's powerful tail propelled it forward with explosive speed, its jaws opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth as it struck Connor low along the torso and hip, its jaws clamping down with bone-crushing force. Serrated teeth tore through muscle and major blood vessels, causing immediate catastrophic blood loss before the shark released him and vanished into the murky water. Connor's friends on the surface heard his muffled scream through their snorkels and immediately swam toward his position, but the damage had already been done. The bull shark released Connor after the initial devastating bite and disappeared into the murky depths as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Connor floating motionless in a growing cloud of blood. Connor's friends managed to reach him and bring him to the surface, but his massive injuries made survival impossible despite their immediate efforts to signal for help. Lifeguards responded within minutes, but Connor was pronounced dead shortly after being brought to shore. The investigation confirmed that Connor had been attacked by a bull shark in conditions that wildlife experts described as ideal for mistaken identity encounters. The murky water, proximity to fishing activity, and Connor's approach toward the shark had combined to create a perfect storm of circumstances that triggered the predator's aggressive response. No attempt was made to locate or destroy the responsible shark. But ocean predators weren't the only captive animals that could prove deadly when safety protocols were ignored. At a private exotic animal facility in Ohio, a dedicated trainee's emotional attachment to a magnificent predator would lead her to make a fatal decision that no amount of education could have prepared her for. It was September 15, 2013, and the late afternoon sun filtered through the trees surrounding the private exotic animal facility in rural Ohio as Natalie Flores prepared for her final week as a trainee. The 25-year-old animal science graduate had been working at the facility for 3 months, learning the complex procedures required to care for rescued big cats, bears, and other exotic animals that had been surrendered by private owners or confiscated by authorities. Natalie had dreamed of working with exotic animals since childhood, earning her degree in animal science before seeking hands-on experience at one of the few facilities in the state licensed to house such dangerous predators. Her supervisors had been impressed by her dedication and natural ability to read animal behavior, though they had noticed her tendency to form emotional attachments to individual animals that went beyond professional boundaries. The facility housed 15 exotic animals, including a magnificent Siberian tiger named Boris, who had been rescued from a bankrupt roadside zoo 2 years earlier. The aging male had been used in educational programs before his retirement, and his calm demeanor around humans had made him one of Natalie's favorite animals to work with. She often spent extra time observing Boris during her breaks, fascinated by his intelligence and apparent gentleness despite his massive size. Siberian tigers are the largest living cat species, with adult males weighing up to 660 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length. These apex predators possess incredible strength and lightning-fast reflexes, capable of taking down prey much larger than themselves through ambush tactics and overwhelming force. During her final week at the facility, Natalie had been assigned to evening feeding duties, a responsibility that required strict adherence to safety protocols due to the animals' heightened alertness during mealtimes. The evening shift was typically handled by a single staff member, and the facility's camera system had a known blind spot near Boris's enclosure that was scheduled for repair the following month. As Natalie approached Boris's enclosure for the evening feeding, she noticed that a section of the outer safety barrier had been damaged during recent maintenance work. The repair was scheduled for the following day, but the damage created a gap that allowed closer access to the tiger's primary enclosure than safety protocols permitted. Natalie had been warned about the structural defect and instructed to exercise extra caution in the area. Boris appeared completely relaxed as he waited for his evening meal, lying peacefully in his favorite spot near the feeding station. The massive tiger's calm demeanor and apparent recognition of Natalie's presence gave her confidence that she could safely approach the damaged barrier for a quick photograph. She had been documenting her experiences at the facility throughout her training period, and a photo with Boris would be the perfect way to commemorate her final week. Natalie pulled out her phone and switched to selfie mode, wanting to capture herself with the magnificent Siberian tiger in the background. She positioned herself near the gap in the damaged barrier, holding her phone at arm's length to frame both her smiling face and Boris resting peacefully behind her. Natalie's fatal mistake came when she extended her arm through the damaged outer barrier opening, attempting to steady her phone for a closer shot. The gap was large enough for Boris to reach through with his forelimbs, a structural weakness that should have rendered the enclosure inaccessible to staff until repairs were completed. Boris reacted instantly. His massive paw shot through the opening, claws embedding deep into Natalie's forearm as he yanked with astonishing force. A second paw followed, gripping her shoulder and pinning her against the barrier as she screamed. The tiger's claws severed muscle and ruptured major blood vessels, causing rapid blood loss as Natalie collapsed against the fencing. Unable to pull her fully through the barrier, Boris maintained his grip for several seconds before releasing and retreating, his predatory response triggered and satisfied by the intrusion. Natalie's body was discovered during the next scheduled facility check approximately 45 minutes later, the delay explained by the isolated nature of her evening duties. and the camera blind spot that had prevented remote monitoring of the incident. Veterinary examination of Boris revealed no abnormal behavior or health issues, confirming that the attack had been a natural predatory response to human intrusion into his territory. The tiger was not destroyed, as officials determined the incident resulted from human error rather than aggressive animal behavior. The investigation revealed that Natalie had violated multiple safety protocols by approaching the damaged barrier and reaching through the barrier. The facility implemented enhanced security measures and revised training procedures to prevent similar incidents, including electronic monitoring systems and mandatory buddy system protocols for all animal interactions. Thanks for watching. Click the next video for the next stories.